She says it's love, but everything feels like permission. At first, it won't feel toxic. It will feel intense. She wants to know where you are, who you're with, why you took longer to reply, why your energy changed, why you need privacy, why certain people still have access to you, why your freedom suddenly feels like a threat. And because it sounds emotional, because it sounds vulnerable, because it sounds like fear. Most men misread it. They call it passion. She just loves hard. She's scared to lose me. She's protective. She cares more than most. But here's where most men fail. Control through insecurity rarely introduces itself as control. It introduces itself as love with conditions. Love with surveillance. Love with emotional consequences. Love with invisible rules. And that's how permission slowly replaces partnership. This pattern is dangerous because it often doesn't begin with aggression. It begins with emotional fragility. She feels insecure, so instead of managing that insecurity internally, she starts managing you externally. Your behavior becomes the target. Your lifestyle becomes the adjustment. Your freedom becomes the negotiation. Because controlling your environment feels easier than confronting her fear. And this is where many men unknowingly become emotional caretakers instead of equal partners. You start modifying harmless things, not because they're wrong, but because they reduce conflict. You text faster, post less, explain more, cancel plans, avoid certain people, filter your tone, shrink your personality. And at first, it feels small. But here's where it gets worse. Tiny adjustments repeated over time can quietly erase who you are. This is how insecurity becomes dominance, not through force, through emotional pressure. If you loved me, why do you need that? That makes me uncomfortable. You care more about them. I guess I just matter less. Do whatever you want. That last one? Do whatever you want. That's rarely freedom. That's emotional bait. Because now your choice is loaded with consequence. And many men don't realize they are no longer making decisions. They are managing reactions. This is where guilt becomes control's favorite weapon. Because guilt is powerful. It makes you question healthy behavior. It makes normal independence feel selfish. It makes boundaries feel cruel. So instead of asking, "Is this reasonable?" you start asking, "How do I avoid upsetting her?" And once your life becomes centered around emotional damage control, you are no longer leading your life. You are performing for stability. But here's the psychological trap. The insecure controlling partner often genuinely believes they are protecting love. That's why this pattern becomes confusing, because it may not look malicious. It may look wounded. She may cry, withdraw, accuse, collapse emotionally. And because many men are taught to protect emotionally, they start sacrificing logic for rescue mode. But emotional pain does not automatically equal emotional truth. Just because someone feels threatened does not mean you are doing something wrong. This distinction changes everything. Possessiveness often disguises itself as depth, but possession is not intimacy. Possession says, "Limit yourself so I feel safer." Intimacy says, "Let's build trust so neither of us needs cages." One seeks mutual security, the other seeks behavioral restriction. Most men miss this. Jealousy can feel flattering in the beginning. It can feel like proof you matter. But unmanaged jealousy often becomes surveillance, and surveillance eventually becomes suffocation. Because insecurity is rarely satisfied by one sacrifice. It adapts. You remove one trigger, it finds another. You reassure one fear, a new one appears. Because if insecurity is untreated internally, no amount of external obedience will permanently fix it. And here's where the cycle becomes even more dangerous. The longer you over-accommodate insecurity, the more abnormal control starts feeling normal. You stop noticing red flags, because survival mode becomes routine. You normalize checking in constantly. You normalize over-explaining harmless choices. You normalize apologizing for independence. You normalize shrinking. Until one day, you're asking permission for things that never required permission in the first place. And that is how identity gets replaced by compliance. Not in one dramatic moment, but through repeated emotional negotiations that slowly train you to disconnect from your own instincts. This is also why these dynamics can feel addictive, because control through insecurity often alternates between pressure and relief, tension, then affection, restriction, then reassurance, conflict, then closeness. And that inconsistency can psychologically trap people harder than constant pain. Because now you're not just chasing love, you're chasing emotional relief. And many men confuse relief with resolution. But relief is not healing. It's temporary release from pressure. This is why emotional whiplash can become one of the strongest forms of control. When someone creates the anxiety, then becomes the solution to the anxiety, attachment deepens, even while freedom disappears. This is why some men wake up months or years later and barely recognize themselves. They didn't get dominated overnight. They got edited, piece by piece, until they became easier to control, less social, less expressive, less free, less themselves. And this is the brutal truth. Anything that requires you to consistently betray yourself to maintain peace will eventually cost you your identity. Now let's be clear, healthy reassurance matters. Relationships require sensitivity. Transparency matters. Respect matters. But there's a massive difference between consideration and submission. Consideration says, I respect your feelings. Submission says, I will abandon myself to prevent them. One is love, the other is fear. This is where strong boundaries become essential. Not yelling, not cruelty, not revenge. Clarity. I care about you, but I will not live under suspicion. I love you, but I do not need permission to exist. I can reassure you, but I will not shrink to stabilize your insecurity. Because boundaries expose motives fast. Healthy love may struggle, but it adjusts. Control through insecurity usually escalates, because control does not want understanding, it wants certainty. And certainty often means power. This is where she's actually testing, not whether you care, whether your backbone can survive emotional pressure. Can you remain calm when guilt appears? Can you stay kind without surrendering autonomy? Can you love someone without becoming psychologically manageable? Because many men confuse peacekeeping with strength, when in reality, avoiding conflict at the cost of self-respect is often slow surrender. And here's the deeper reality. People who fear abandonment sometimes try to prevent loss by increasing control. If I can manage him, I won't lose him. But this strategy backfires. Because control may reduce uncertainty temporarily, but it also destroys freedom. And where freedom dies, authentic desire often dies with it. People do not feel deeply connected where they feel psychologically trapped. So pay attention to the pattern. If love constantly feels like monitoring, pay attention. If normal behavior keeps requiring defense, pay attention. If your independence keeps being treated like betrayal, pay attention. If peace only exists when you become smaller, pay attention. Because real love does not require captivity. Real love does not use guilt as a leash. Real love does not confuse fear with devotion. Real love does not punish individuality. Real love builds trust, so permission becomes unnecessary. The strongest thing a man can say is not, "Tell me what to do so you feel okay." It's, "I will love you honestly. I will respect you fully. I will reassure you when it's healthy. But I will not surrender my identity to make your insecurity feel in control." Because the moment love becomes constant permission, it stops being love and starts becoming fear, wearing affection as a disguise.